Welcome to Risky Bitness. This week's episode is all about Deadly Towers, the 1986 NES action game developed by IREM and published by Broderbund Software. It was released in North America in 1987. It was called Masho, or Evil Bells in Japan. It was almost called Hell's Bells in the West until Nintendo of America put the kibosh on the title. Broderbund changed the title to Deadly Towers, referring to the 7 towers the player must traverse in the game. Before we dive in, I would like to thank everyone who likes and comments on my videos and anyone who has subscribed to the channel. You guys are the best. I'm going to do my best here to get this one in without any background noise. At the moment, the fireworks in my neighborhood are going on again, as they are every single night, and that might make my dog bark. So I'm sorry, I'm trying my best. Now, onto the meat of the video here. Deadly Towers is a great game. No, really, I know this one gets a bad rap, but it's totally undeserved. To understand why it's a great game, first, you really need some context. In the summer of 1986 and the fall of 1987 in the US, the Famicom and NES were still pretty new, and they were delivering new experiences to the living room. Adventure games with RPG elements like this one certainly weren't unique or groundbreaking, but it was still a very young genre. A lot of features today's gamers have come to expect didn't exist yet, either because they hadn't been thought of, or because the technology just didn't allow for it, or because no one had figured out how to do it yet. It's for this reason that Deadly Towers doesn't really give players a lot of guidance coming out of the gate. You find yourself in front of a castle with one open door and one closed door. As you move forward through the game world, you're immediately confronted with a large number of hazards and enemies with multiple paths to try. Every doorway leads to new dangers, and just when you think you're starting to figure out the lay of the land, you find yourself warped into a dungeon with no map and no obvious way out. Before long, you've been killed and are forced to start your journey again from the starting point. It's no surprise at all that players found this more than a little frustrating. I've even read that confused players wrote to Broderbund Software and they would receive a guide in the mail. I really wish I could get my hands on that. If you have one, let me know, I'd love to see it. In lieu of that, the game's manual does a pretty nice job of giving the player lots of information. If you read the manual once before playing, you'll find yourself more well equipped to deal with the game's many challenges. Once you have some direction, the game becomes much easier to understand. Furthermore, games of this era generally were made very difficult in order to add value. There was little incentive to purchase a game if all of its content could be experienced as a weekend rental. Making a game very difficult and adding large mazes that the player can just fall into was a way of padding out the experience of the game, while adding mystery and adventure to what is an otherwise short and simple game. A big part of understanding and appreciating Deadly Towers comes from demystifying its more confounding elements. This game didn't hold your hand, but I'll help you out a little bit here. The first question you'll probably ask when playing this game is, what am I supposed to do? This is certainly the question my sisters and I asked when we got this game. I was only 6 years old at the time and I don't remember making it very far at all. When you walk through the first door, you're inside the main castle keep, which I'll refer to as the overworld. The overworld is actually a very brief section compared to the rest of the game, but you'll die quite a lot trying to get through it until you learn to avoid the enemies and the dungeon entrances. You'll notice your character moves somewhat slowly, and the little swords he fires out of his crotch are also very slow. They do very little damage to enemies, and the amount of damage you take is pretty absurd. Enemies very seldom drop hearts to refill your life. Not to mention that every hit stuns you and knocks you back, which can lead to being stun-locked to death or falling off a cliff. You can work around your poor offense by standing very close to an enemy. Because you can only have one sword on screen at a time, standing closer to an enemy means your weapons disappear faster so you can throw more. A turbo controller is your best friend here too, allowing you to kill most enemies pretty quickly. You can move and shoot in 8 directions, which is a nice touch, especially since enemies cannot. Your main goal is to make your way through this overworld area and get to the flame. The flame lies at the base of the castle's 7 towers. Once you reach this area, the real game begins. Once you get used to it and know the path, you can get through the overworld in like 3 minutes. From here, your goal is to climb each tower and defeat the boss above. Each boss guards a bell which must be burned to open the path to the evil wizard Rubus. Luckily, Rubus was kind enough to leave a big magic flame at the base of the towers for you to burn his bells in. What a guy. When you enter a doorway, you must climb the stairs up the side of the castle, challenging monsters along the way. Then climb the monster-infested tower before challenging the boss at the top. Once all 7 bells have been burned, the path to Rubus will open. Pretty simple, right? After 3 and 5 bells have been burned, enemies in the overworld become stronger. So now you might ask what the point of the dungeons is and why you just fall into them at random. Well, the good news is, it's not random at all. Each dungeon has a set entrance and exit. Once you learn where the entrances and the exits are, you only go to them when you want to. The entrances are simply invisible. The intention is for the player to learn their location by falling into them. From there, the player is expected to draw his or her own maps of the dungeon as part of the gameplay experience. Again, no hand-holding here. It even says in the manual to draw yourself a map. And we used to do that all the time in the 80s with these games. These games didn't have maps. Either you got one with the game in the manual, and you had a big poster you'd have to fold out to look and find out where you are in the game, or you would get some graph paper and a pencil and do it yourself. Obviously today we have hundreds and even thousands of games at our fingertips. I have more games in my Steam library than I'll ever play. But now spending this much time on a single game seems insane. But back in '86, if you got a new game for Nintendo, you're probably stuck with it for a while, so you wanted to get as much out of that cartridge as you could. If that meant spending all weekend mapping all 10 dungeons, it was a pretty good weekend. These dungeons are absolutely massive. There are 10 total dungeons, and while I didn't count the number of rooms, it looks like each one has around or at least 200 rooms. So you could complete the game without ever visiting a dungeon at all, but visiting them does make the game quite a lot easier. This is because the dungeons are your only place in the game that contains shops. Shopkeepers will sell you everything from upgraded weapons to armor to potions, scrolls that can warp you around the game world, and jewels that can warp you to the dungeon's exit or make the dungeon entrances visible. If you find yourself stuck in a dungeon, you can either search for the exit or search for a shopkeeper with a scroll or a jewel. Luckily, maps of all the game's areas can be found online, and I'll put a link to that in the video description. If you want to play this game and try it out, it gets a lot easier once you know where you're going. One final point is that all the game's best items and weapons can be found in the towers. These items can make your swords faster and allow you to throw multiple swords at once. There's also armor that reduces the damage you take to the point where regular enemies don't hurt you at all, and the strongest sword does 4 times the damage of the normal sword. Or is it 8 times? I think it's 4 times. These powerful items are hidden within parallel zones. Like dungeons, parallel zones have invisible entrances and exits, but they can only be found within the stair and tower areas. So stepping into a parallel zone brings you to another version of the same map with different enemies and usually a powerful item or piece of equipment. I think this is a pretty sophisticated gameplay element. You'll also want to pick up all the heart containers as you make your way to the end of the game, raising your max HP up to 300, but look out, because if you die, you will respawn at the beginning with only 100 HP out of your total max, and all your consumable items, any potions, scrolls, or jewels that you have, or some enhancement items that you have, will be gone. When you have all the best items, the boss fights become trivial. In fact, most of them can be defeated simply by standing in the corner and shooting them until they die. You'll also get a full health restore every time you burn one of the bells. Using a guide, I was able to finish this game in a few hours. Speedrunners typically do it in less than 30 minutes. There is one more really curious mystery in Deadly Towers. There's one doorway that's guarded by 2 sentries that can't be killed, which forces you to take the long way around. I've never understood why it's even in the game at all. Why not just not have a door there? It's a really odd choice, but I guess maybe they just wanted to add something mysterious to the game. So now that we've demystified it, it's a lot easier for you to enjoy this game for sure. One of the things that I really love about Deadly Towers is the introduction. The whole backstory scrolls up the screen while this really eerie music plays in the background. 6-year-old me was terrified by this music. I wish someone would do like a metal cover of it. I would do it, but I can't figure out music by ear to save my life. All of the game's music is excellent though. The overall theme alone is infectious and it'll get stuck in your head for days. The graphics are really primitive. They're worse on the NES. There are worse on the NES to be sure. The backgrounds and sprites both look pretty nice though, even though they're not super detailed. The color palette's really limited though, so it does make things look really dry and drab and boring. The enemy designs, while mostly pretty imaginative, are executed poorly and they all look pretty flat. A lot of the bosses, they just look like a blob of color. One of the main enemy types, the Bounder, is just a bouncing ball. It's just such a weird design choice. I would love to see this kind of game get some love with updated graphics, but I don't think it's a popular enough title to warrant that kind of care, which is a real shame. I think if we would give this even like a 16-bit upgrade, where it had nicer graphics and a little bit nicer music, I think it could really be a lot of fun. Deadly Towers came out before battery saves were really a thing, so it uses a password system instead. You can find passwords on the internet if you want to skip some parts of the game, but I really do recommend playing it all the way through. Even when you use a password, you still start at the castle entrance, and you can only obtain a new password by dying. Deadly Towers offers a challenging, unique, and immersive experience with meaningful power-ups to collect and lots of adventure and exploration. The music is excellent, and the gameplay feels truly rewarding. Once you have some direction, it's a lot of fun, and that's why Deadly Towers is not a bad game. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you have anything to add, and be sure to check the description for more videos and affiliate links to help the channel. Until next time, game over.